beginning of Indian civilization. The most ancient civilization of India, known variously as the Harappan, Indus, or Indus Saraswati civilization, were indeed remarkable in many ways. It showed how a well balanced community lives, in which the differences between the rich and the poor are not glaring. In essence, the Harappan societal scenario was not that of exploitation, but of mutual accommodation. This was a statement given by B.B. Lal. So here he states that our ancient Indian civilizations were named as Harappan, Indus, and various other names, and it is not that of exploitation. The Harappan civilization was not on the concept of exploitation, but it was of mutual accommodation that people used to support one another. So the main questions answered in this chapter are: what is a civilization, and was the earliest civilization of the Indian subcontinent, and what were its major achievements? So let's start the chapter with what is a civilization. So at the end of chapter 4, we saw that the first human groups settling down, practicing agriculture, developing some technologies such as construction, metallurgy, transport, and moving towards civilization. So we thought of studying about civilization in this chapter. So metallurgy, that is, it includes the techniques of extracting metals from nature, purifying them, combining them, as well as the scientific study of metals and their properties is what we call the metallurgy. So, first we'll understand what is civilization. So, in general, the term is used for an advanced state of human societies. So, civilization means advanced stage of human societies. So, to be precise, we will consider here that civilization should have at least the following characters. That is, they have to have some form of government and administration to manage more complex society and many activities. And the second point is urbanization. That is, they have to have town planning, the growth of cities and their management, which generally includes water management and drainage systems. The third point is variety of crafts, including the management of raw materials such as stone or metal and the production of finished goods. And they have to be a trade, both internal, that is within the city, and also the external trades. So suppose in India we buy and sell our own goods, that is the internal trade. But if we export our goods to foreign countries, then that is called external trade. That is with various other parts of the world to exchange all sorts of goods. So some form of writing should be there and needed to keep the records and to communicate. And they have to have cultural ideas about life and the world expressed through art, architecture, literature, oral traditions, or some social customs. And the next is they have to have productive agriculture. So these are all what are the basic features of what we call as the civilization. So moving on. It is easy enough to see all these characteristics are present in most societies in the world in which now we live. But when did civilization begin? In the sense we have now understood. So civilization began at different periods of time in different parts of the world. So in region known as the Mesopotamia, that is the modern Iraq or Syria, that happened about 6,000 years ago, and the civilization in ancient Egypt followed a few centuries later. So we'll learn about these and few more civilizations in the later grades, but for now we'll have an understanding. So in many ways, humanity could not have been reached its present stage without the enormous contributions and advances of those ancient civilizations. So for now, however, we will look only at the Indian subcontinent and its northwest region, in where our story will begin. So in this chapter we'll confine to our Indian subcontinent. So we'll study about the later examples in the future grades. So first, moving from village to city. So the vast plains of Punjab, that is now both in India and Pakistan, and the Sindh, now in Pakistan, are watered by the Indus River and its tributaries. It is important to remember that the plains of Punjab were watered with Indus River and its tributaries. And this made these plains fertile and therefore favorable to agriculture. If the soil is fertile, obviously it will be favorable to agriculture. So, what is a tributary? So, a river that flows into a larger river. For instance, the Yamuna is a tributary of Ganga. So, if we say Ganga is flowing, if some river will come and join Ganga, then this becomes a tributary. So, for Ganga, one of the tributaries, Yamuna. A little further east, a few millenniums ago, that is another river, the Saraswati, used to flow from the foothills of Himalayas through Haryana, Punjab, and parts of Rajasthan and Gujarat. It is important to remember these all places. So, in this whole region, from about 3500 BC, that is before Common Era, villages grew into the towns, and with increasing trade and other exchanges, those towns further grew into cities. So first villages turned into towns and in turn they turned into cities. So this transition happened around 2600 years before the birth of Christ. So archaeologists gave these civilizations several names, that is the Indus, Harappan, Indus Saraswati or Sindhu Saraswati. These are the names given by archaeologists. So we will use all these terms. Its inhabitants are called the Harappans. So the people living in Harappan civilization are called Harappans. So it is one of the oldest civilizations in the world. So the Harappan civilization is one of the oldest civilizations. So why are the inhabitants of this civilization called Harappans? So this is simply because the city of Harappa, which is in Pakistan's Punjab, was the first of this civilization to be excavated way back in 1920-21, over a century ago. So because of the city of Harappan, so the people living in that civilization are called the Harappans. So this development is also called the first urbanization of India. So here we can see Harappa, the Saraswati River. So shows the Indus or Sindhu, and it has 5 main tributaries. Indus has 5 main tributaries. The important cities grew along these rivers. So obviously when river is flowing, agriculture is favorable, so people start living in these places. So these places will start to convert into towns and later into cities. So there were many sites along the Saraswati River, which today goes by the name Ghaggar in India and Hakra in Punjab, and hence it is the Ghaggar-Hakra river. And this river is now seasonal because it flows only during the rainy season. The Saraswati river is first mentioned in Rig Veda, an ancient collection of prayers which we will read about in the next chapter. So in this, Saraswati is worshipped both as goddess and as a river flowing from the mountain to the sea. Now we'll understand about town planning. Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, that is both are now in Pakistan, were the first 2 cities of this civilization which were to be found out by us. So their identification goes back to 1924, a century ago. So several sites followed in the Indus Plains, which is why the civilization was initially called Indus Valley Civilization, because it was near Indus River, so it is called Indus Valley Civilization. Later on, other major cities in Gujarat, Haryana, and some parts of Pakistan, and hundreds of smaller sites, such as those in Gujarat, were found out, and some of them were excavated. So, such find outs continue even now. So, it is interesting to note that Saraswati Basin includes not only the 2 major cities, which are these 2, but also several smaller ones. So, the larger Harappan cities were built according to precise plans. So it was not that people were coming in building, but they were built according to the plan. And they had wide streets which were often oriented to the cardinal directions, and most cities seem to have been surrounded by fortifications. So a fortification means a massive wall around a settlement. So if suppose we have our house, we'll build a compound wall. In the same way, a massive wall surrounding of settlement or city, generally for protective purposes. So those are called fortifications, and had two parts, that is the upper town where the local elite probably lived, and the lower town where common people lived. Elite in the sense here the word refers to the higher layers of the society, such as rulers, officials and administrators lived in the upper town. In the lower town, the common people lived. So some large buildings seem to have been used for collective purposes. For instance, warehouses where goods to be transported were stored, and individual houses of various sizes lined in the streets and smaller lanes. Interestingly, the quality of the construction was the same for small and the big houses, and all these houses were generally made of bricks. It is important to remember that the houses were made of bricks. So the purpose of some of these structures remains a matter of debate. This is in the case of the famous Great Bath in Mohenjo-daro, a small but elaborate tank which was measured 12 into 7 meters and had waterproofing materials. So this tank was surrounded by small rooms, one of which contained a well, and there was a drain in one corner of the tank to empty it from time to time and refill it with fresh water. So, what was the purpose of such a structure? Archaeologists have proposed several possible interpretations: a public bath for people, a bath for the royal family only, or a tank used for religious rituals. The first interpretation is now ruled out because it turns out to be that in this city, most houses had individual bathrooms. So, there were some findings which actually the reason for their being in that particular place was not found out by archaeologists, but they have many insights, and such as it might be a public bath for people or a bath for the royal family. But the first one was rejected because each house has its own individual bathrooms. Next, we'll speak about water management. So the Harappans gave much importance to water management and cleanliness. So they often had separate areas for bathing in their rooms and homes, and these were connected to a larger network of drains, so which generally ran below the streets and took the wastewater away. So they had a proper water management systems. And in Mohenjo-daro, people drew water from hundreds of wells made of bricks, but in outer regions, it may have been from the ponds or nearby streams or human-made reservoirs. So the reservoir is like water is stored artificially. So these are called reservoirs. And in case of Dholavira, which is in Gujarat, the largest reservoir, which is measured to be 73 meters in length, is found. So, in this particular place, the last or the least 6 large reservoirs were built with stones and even which are cut into rock. So, most of them were connected through underground drains for sufficient water and harvesting and their proper supply. So, this is the large reservoir which is cut in the rock, measuring 33 meters in length. So, after water management, we'll move on to what did Harappans actually eat. So, Harappans created many of their settlements along the banks of rivers, large or small. So, this is the logical choice, not just for easy access to water but also for agriculture, since rivers enrich the soil around them. Archaeological findings have shown that Harappans grew barley, wheat, some millets, and sometimes rice, in addition to pulses and a variety of vegetables. So they learned how to do agriculture in vast, and they were also the first in Eurasia to grow cotton. Eurasia in the sense Europe and Asia together, and which they used to weave into clothes. So they also found out how to grow cotton and they used to weave into clothes. And they made farming tools including the plow, and some of which continue to be used by modern day farmers as well. And this intense agricultural activity was managed by hundreds of some rural sites or villages, and then as now, the cities could survive only if enough agricultural produce from the rural areas reached them on a daily basis. So they had their supplies provided on a daily basis. And the Harappans also domesticated a number of animals for meat consumption and fished both in rivers and in the sea. This is known from the large number of animal and fish bones found during excavations. So, what did Harappan cooking pots contain? Scientific examinations of clay pots have provided some answers. That is, both expected ones like the dairy products and surprising ones such as remains of the turmeric, ginger, and banana were also found. So, clearly, their diet was quite in variety. So, the archaeologists have also found the clay pots as well. Next is how they did trade, a brisk trade. So the Harappans were engaged in active trade not only within their own civilization, that is, they had internal trade as well, but not just that, they also had external trade with the other civilizations and cultures within and outside India. And they exported ornaments, timber, and some objects of daily use as well, probably also gold, cotton, and possibly some food items as well. So the most favored ornaments were beads of chameleon. Next is a reddish semi-precious stone found mostly in Gujarat was also exported. Next, Harappan crafts people developed special techniques to drill them so a string could pass through them and to decorate them in various ways. So they also worked on conch shells into beautiful shell bangles which require sophisticated techniques as shell is a hard material. So they even learnt many sophisticated ideas. Now we'll study about what Harappans imported in exchange of the exported goods is not clear. So what they have imported is not clear. Only what they've exported is what we have data. And what they have imported might be probably include copper since this metal was not common back home where they were living. So to conduct such a trade, they used land routes and rivers and seas for more far places. And this is first intensive maritime activity in India. Indeed, quite a few Harappan settlements are located in the coastal regions of Gujarat and Sindh. Lothal, a small settlement in Gujarat, has surprisingly huge basin measuring 217 meters in length and 36 meters in width, and the length is just a little more than that of 2 football grounds. So this basin must have been a dockyard, that is a structure used to receive and send boats for further transportation of goods. So they even had such great equipments, and such elaborate trade requires traders to be able to identify their routes and also each other. So this seems to have been the chief purpose of thousands of small seals which were created, which have been excavated from many settlements. So seals were there so that people could identify what their goods was. And these seals were generally made of statite, a soft stone that could be hardened through heating. So they measure only a few centimeters and generally depict animal figures with above them and a few cents that are part of a writing system. But that system and the symbolic meaning of the animal figures are yet to be understood. So they had some animal figures on it, but we don't know what they actually meant. And what is certain is that they somehow relate to trade activities. So here we can find that the bronze mirror, a terracotta pot, and few stone weights are also used by Harappans. So next, the end or a new beginning. So around 1900 BCE, the Sindhu Saraswati civilization had all its achievements but began to fall apart. So the cities were abandoned one by one. So if any inhabitants remained, they adopted a rural lifestyle in the changed environment. It appears that the earlier government or administration no longer existed. Gradually, the Harappans scattered over hundreds, if not thousands, of the small rural settlements. So everything was running fine, but after some time, maybe there have been some governmental issues or something that people started to scatter into small rural settlements. So, what might be the cause for this? Archaeologists have proposed many factors. Long back, it was thought the warfare or invasions may have been the cause for this, but there is no trace of warfare or invasion. So, they have thought that it might be due to war, but there were no traces of any war or such things. So, indeed, the Harappans do not seem to have kept any army or weapons of war as far as the evidence goes. So, it seems to have been a relatively peaceful civilization. So, they had not had any weapons or anything. So, Harappans were said to be as they were relatively known as they were peaceful civilization. So, two factors which are currently agreed upon, that is, the first one is a climatic change which affected much of the world from 2200 BC onwards. So, the first one they suspect is the climatic change that is causing reduced rainfall and a drier phase. So, this could have made agriculture more difficult in that place where they live, so they started to scatter and could have reduced the food supply to the cities. And the second is the Saraswati river dried up in its central basin, and suddenly the cities there, such as the Kalibangan or Bhana Valley, were abundant. So there could have been other factors, but these two remain the main factors. The climatic factor is the first one, and the second one is draining up of Saraswati river. These two were approved by many of the archaeologists. Although the cities were not found, but much of the Harappan culture and technology survived and was passed on to the next phase of Indian civilization, which we will explore in the future chapters. So even though the cities were not seen now, but the technologies which they have used have been passed on to the next Indian civilization. So in this chapter, we have read the following things, that is the Indus, Harappan and all these civilizations, and a productive agriculture brought a variety of crops, and these all were studied in this chapter.